Tri-City Sports Now, the man in charge of the SoCon.com's own SoCon pieces. He joins us every Monday at 1:30. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff to talk about with the Southern Conference, including a new basketball coach being named, Jay McAuley. This isn't a surprise. After Mike Young left for about, they've got a good thing going at Wofford. And the idea, I think, became, wait, if we can't have Mike underpay his top lieutenant, he'll think he's struck it rich because he was a lieutenant. I also know that B.J. Mackey, who Adam Nelson at HoopDirt.com said was a candidate, was not interviewed. B.J. Via social media and such, private message. But nevertheless, Jay McAuley, new basketball coach at Wofford. All right, 9-0 next year, but can they continue their lofty perch as a pretty darn fine mid-major basketball program?
Yeah, I think, like I said, I don't think that they'll go 18-0. Those seasons are rare, if ever. But I think they'll have enough returning next year to be. If you look at what Nathan Hoover did down the stretch, having him alone, I mean, Storm Murphy, who also shoots 40%, better than 40% from three-point range. I think the real question mark for Wofford, and this might be where Jay McAuley is able to use some of his expertise, because he coached big men at both Furman and Wofford. Goodwin's up and Cameron Jackson and Matt Rafferty. So that might be where it's wrong. Some big men, losing a guy like Cameron Jackson to graduation. I know they return Keve Aluma, also a Chavez Goodwin. Those two are good players. I think Goodwin's one of the better rebounders, or will be next year. And we saw some flashes this season from Aluma. Offensively, I think they'll be in better shape in the post, but it's going to be hard to replace a Cameron Jackson and even a Matthew Pegram who came off the bench and gave them good minutes as far as defensively, and he's also a threat to I think it's plenty in the backcourt to challenge in this league, but it's going to be a question of whether they can bring a big man along as to whether they can challenge, let's say, East Tennessee State for the title next year.
Well, Jackson's no slouch, but you mentioned that. I'm a little surprised because, hey, NCAA championship game, I remember people tweeting now. And it seems like that's the way basketball is going. Now you three players, 2 7-footers, and 3 players standing 6'10" or more. Dare I say, obviously Meladen Armas, for instance, the 6'10" player, is a good player, but what is the role of the center in basketball? Certainly that's going the way of, I don't know, the contact hitter in baseball or something like this. Few and far between. What do you think the role of the center is in college basketball in 2019?
I'll give you an example. I had the opportunity to watch play against Furman, and they've got a couple of pretty skilled 7-footers that did what you mentioned that you don't see a lot of, is they can play with their backs big, and they're good rim protectors. And so you do see some of that. I think that would be, what Steve Forbes is, and I'm not a coach, so seen around the league, so it's harder to prepare for. And, there's not that team that has the size that ETSU does in the league. There's a couple guys for UNCG. I know Dickey and Hamilton are pretty big boys, and the kid coming off the bench, Abdul Salam, I guess is his name. He's another one that could develop skill-wise, but nothing as far as with the depth that ETSU is establishing now. I think Wofford last year, with Cameron Jackson and Pegram, if they could kick them out of foul trouble, they had some pretty good size with those two guys. But I think you're right. I think college basketball is a lot more guard oriented, but I think at the mid-major level, if you creating there, and I think it's going to be a challenge to really defend that. And then if you've got guys that, the question for ETSU, I think, will be, will the guys from outside be consistent all the way through the year, shooting the ball from the perimeter? And if they do that, that makes you extremely tough to beat, because we saw what happened with Wofford this year. It was picture poison. So, but I think, to ETSU's credit, they'll have more depth in the front court than Wofford did last year, as far as Wofford having to make sure they kept Jackson out of foul trouble.
Well, SoCon John Hooper, it should be said, McAuley was a top assistant at Furman under Nico Medved, who actually gave a press release statement of support. He's now at Colorado State. Remember, Medved spent a year at Drake, but McAuley was there. So he's won in the conference before as an assistant. I would say, I was thinking of this, I was thinking of stock up, stock down. Going to turn it around at Mercer, possibly there, stock up, but
with Chattanooga, I mean, they've had so many guys. They've had 3 important players already transfer out. Got the freshman of the year, Kevin Easley's gone. Also transferring out is Jerry Johnson, who started some games for them at guard, and then also Donovan Toadley. He was a pretty quick point guard off the bench, also transferred out. So. There's some people have said, I wonder if they'll have a team by the time the season starts. But certainly, it's the last 2 or 3 years at Chattanooga. It's been, can we keep these guys around until June? And that's certainly been the case a little bit at Sanford as well. But I think Sanford, I'll be interested to see what they had, because I thought they were real talented last year.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the backcourt, when you got Josh Sharkey, as quick as he is, and then you got Myron Gordon and Brandon Austin coming back. Really, the only guy they have to really replace is the center Ruben Guerrero, who had a pretty good season and transferred in for 1 year from South Florida. So if he can replace, the big man, the center, I think Sanford, they've got some talent around to be a real factor next year. Western Carolina could be a dark horse. I think their stock's going to be up, just for the simple fact that Mason Faulkner, the 3-star transfer from Northern Kentucky, will be eligible. He sat out a year, so he'll be eligible to play. And I think that makes a huge difference for them, because they kind of lacked a third scorer this year.
Oh, the one other sidebar you mentioned, Northern Kentucky, certainly they lost their coach, Brandon, to Cincinnati yesterday. It was announced Will Wade is going to stay at LSU. So people who might be, contemplating, is Steve Forbes going to leave? And I think we've seen the last of the Southern Conference coaches leaving in basketball, for that matter, football. And as I've told you before, next year Forbes becomes 55, and he might be 55 going on 35, but that just becomes the age where big-time schools say, let's look elsewhere. So unless ETSU was making a tournament run, is what happened with Mike Young, I think that, and even then, it just depends on what job is open, where. Schools that might actually look at him will be keeping their coaches. You don't expect Mike Young, unless he would go, Owen Day at Virginia Tech for a while. Who's going to hire him? That sort of thing you got to ask yourself. So I thought it was good news, actually, for ETSU fans, because it looks like the events of yesterday, and Forbes was only a secondary candidate at Cincinnati, but there next year. But I would, I won't bet $100, but I'll wager maybe about a 5 or so that he has a lengthy career at ETSU. I really will. And I think ETSU could be next year's Wofford. So there you go. All right, let's talk. Yes. I wanted to talk to you now about spring football practice. Let's keep the big story that I saw was that coming back for one more year, linebacker from Temple, Jared Folks, who made a huge impact on the Buccaneers defense. A lot of freshmen. Again, what can be learned from a spring game? I know, kickers that kick the winning field goal, they kick one extra fans. How did Quentin Dormady turn out after he was 10 for 10 in the spring Eastern Michigan? So there have been plenty of stories about guys with who have good spring games and they don't ever even hit the field. But so I want to ask you here just the stories around spring football for me. But what else did you take from Southern Conference spring football?
Well, I mean, it's really tough. Well, I'll say this, at the FCS level, it's a lot different than the FBS level at this time of year because true freshmen, and it's very rare that you see them going and start. It's not quite as, I guess it doesn't occur quite as much as it does in the FCS because there's so many guys that are, let's be honest, there's a lot more transfers coming in and guys that things didn't pan out as an FBS school. So there's a little bit more turnover, especially at the quarterback position, which I think is interesting. You talked about Cameron Lewis, or I guess we haven't really talked about him yet, but he was the starter, took all the snaps, I guess.
Yeah.
Game. But a lot of people, and we talked about, I don't think he's going to be the starter, but I wouldn't say that he's definitely not going to be the starter. I just think that there are other guys, coming in that have a chance to prove themselves in the spring. So in a way, in the fall camp, so in a way, it is hard to tell, especially what your offense is going to look like. And I guess that's the question I should ask you is I didn't see the spring game, but is there any difference in, any wrinkles as far as what the offense looked like?
Yes, I don't think they'll throw a pass next year. They played a lot of I formation. It wouldn't surprise me if they just went straight right back to the single wing. Obviously I'm, being hyperbolic there, but I really did think that that ETSU does not have the best receivers in the world. One guy kind of made a statement by the name of Will Huzzle. He seemed to be the breakout guy. I was really hoping for Julian Lane. And I know that name probably doesn't mean a whole lot for you, but here on 1420 WEMB Sports Radio 2 years ago, we carried the Unicoi County football games, okay? And Julian Lane single-handedly for West Green, which usually he single-handedly defeated Unicoi County and prevented them from having their first winning record in a generation. UCHS got it this past year, but Lane was so dominant. And he then proceeded to, sign with ETSU. Redshirted last year. He caught one swing pass. I saw that. Only he wore number 38, which also I don't think is a great sign that he'd get on the field as a wide receiver, to be brutally honest with you. But that was a player I looked at. But the real star of the game, in my opinion, breaking off Williams, running back from Swainsboro, Georgia. Williams with several long runs. Offense. Or at least he says he presumes that he is that's what he's playing for and he believes himself to be in 2019, that he will be the focal point of the offense.
Yeah, and I've heard good things about him. I've heard he, kind of in the same fashion as what Clay Holmes is, and the fact that he's a real super runner, and when he gets in the open field, he's pretty fast. So it'll be interesting to see if they can get him kind of open things up. And Mark, probably other than quarterback for ETSU would be, I would presume it would be
Yeah, there's, I mean, the big thing at ETSU right now is they've got that quarterback who, a grad transfer who is coming to ETSU. And, he actually started one game for the Chancelloteers. So, that's who I think a lot of people are kind of looking at being the quarterback next. To you that Cam, it would be surprising to me if Lewis was the starting quarterback. Not that I think that his resume in high school is poor. In fact, I think it is pretty good. But it just is. He seemed and just seemed much more of a runner than a passer. Let's put it that way. Calvin Smith, by the way, I think is the name of the quarterback transferring from Coastal Carolina. Well, let me see.
Yeah, I don't know much about.
Excuse me, that's incorrect, but I'll get that for you. But anyway, go ahead.
Oh, is it Chance correct?
Yes, it is. Anyway, Chance. I could not remember, and I had not written it down. So yes.
I know the reason he did not play a lot at Coastal Carolina was because he stayed injured.
Yeah.
And then he got behind the eight ball, and didn't really ever get a chance to get back in there. And I guess the other guy stole his starting job.
Well, remember also last year with Logan Marchie, who graduated early and such. This out on Marchie because I certainly know many times where I have felt SoCon John Hooper just in my own life where I didn't fit in, but that was sort of the. I'll still to this day say he's a better quarterback than Jared Guarantano, and I'm not going to put down somebody because he doesn't quote unquote fit in when he comes from Connecticut to Tennessee. I think it's kind of to be expected, but still, that was sort of that I heard that through the grapevine. Herink was, although perhaps the athlete that Marchie was, why he was able to succeed. That's what the people at ETSU will tell you off, when the mics are off. Anyway, with Marchie, though, getting the start at the beginning of last year, hey, Chance Thrasher, Sanders likes the recruits for the transfers in from the big programs, if one can call Coastal Carolina a big program. But they're, FCS, or excuse me, FBS, and ETSU is FCS.
You're seeing a lot more of the, I guess, the group of five. Sometimes, like an injury for Thrasher, or I know the Peyton Derrick kid from Appalachian State is transferred to Wofford. So they're either looking for an opportunity to maybe start, or things didn't work out for them the first year there. So interestingly enough, Peyton Derrick. So it's. I think this year you just look at who teams have coming back. Robert Riddle, I thought was really good at Mercer until he got injured. Actually had more passing yards than Devlin Hodges in that game against Hanford, in which Mercer sprung the upset early in the season. Tyree Adams, I think he'll be a Peyton Award lineup. Nick Tiano, the big quarterback, has kind of pro size really coming back to Chattanooga. And Reese Udinsky, we all saw what he did last year for VMI as far as being just really a gunslinger back there and made their offense pretty dangerous while they weren't ever they didn't win a game in the SoCon last year. I think they did put a scare into a lot of folks, including ETSU. Brandon Rainey, the guy from the Citadel, played really well down the stretch last year, and I think they brought him in the second half against the Sanford game, and I think the Citadel scored 38 second half points, so he'll be one to watch. Joe Newman at Wofford is the returning starter, although among the Wofford people I've talked to, there's going to be an open job, a competition for the job in fall practice. I mentioned Derek, but also a guy in Jimmy Wyrick who played, I think, in 2 games last year, but he's had a knee injury during the spring, so it depends on how fast he can rehab it. But they're saying he is the guy that should win the job, but Wofford probably will play 2, maybe 3 quarterbacks next year.
Yeah, they've done it before. They've done it before, so yeah. And you said who at the Citadel again?
Brandon Rainey.
Brandon Rainey. Who else do you have? I mean, do you have a beat on who might be the new starter at, say, Samford?
Yes, South Florida transfer Chris Oladoka, and he'll compete, I guess, with a guy named William Welch, who was their starter, or was their leading returning passer. Now, he threw like 4 passes last year, I think. So he'll be back, and I think, Oladoka is kind of he's a little bit different than Hodges in the fact. I mean, Hodges obviously was a threat to run it a little bit, but he's pretty quick. But I think the not necessarily the spread offense changes, but the run pass ratio changes for Sanford next year a little bit. Throughout, I think that will be certainly a change for a hatch attack offense that favors throwing the ball all over the place. So that'll be something to watch. And then at Furman, obviously, their starter graduated. Aaron Granger will be the starter. And, he only started playing quarterback midway through his senior season at Conway High School. So he actually led them pretty deep into the state playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see how he develops because he's really inexperienced. And obviously, we just talked about the ETSU situation. I'm going to ask you about 6'4", 230.
Outside of the Chance Thrasher, the Coastal quarterback, any college experience whatsoever, it came at a JUCO. But other than that, he, so I don't know. Like I said, I would kind of put Lewis, especially since he played in a spring game, ahead of him. To be brutally honest with you, it's not that Lewis. I mean, you look at his stats in the in high school, it was pretty good. Also, I've also kind of liked. In the recruiting class, there is a quarterback from Florida who I have liked a lot this year. Here, the football commander, I got to look his name up. Forgive me here as I look it up on the world's slowest computer. I know that this is terrible and horrible radio and all this, but let's see. They've got a player from the Tampa area, Tyler Riddle. Is a guy from Chamberlain High School, and I although he's sort of skinny, he doesn't have the size that you speak of with Mitchell. He does have the stats. So I mean, if I was going on stats alone, Riddle or the aforementioned, what am I trying to say here? I'd go with as the backup quarterback. Well, Thrasher, I'd say number one, but Lewis or Riddle is who I would go for with ETSU. But there you go. I like this name, Chris Oladoka. That's what I kind of wanted to know about when it came to who would be playing for the Bulldogs of Samford. I think what better South Florida name, SoCon John? I started thinking of the movie Gator with Jerry Reed and everything's okie dokie and the okie fanoki. Well, then how I may bring in to Samford Oladokan?
Yeah.
Come on. How can that?
Well, that's a program. They recruit a lot of great athletes in South Florida. Obviously, it's been a program that's been pretty decent. I know they were last year. Very, very good. So that's Samford is probably getting I've only seen a little bit of what his YouTube video showed, but I'm assuming they're getting a pretty high price. And they've done that before. It was a couple years ago. They had a kid from Arizona State, and the Citadel gave all that young man's job, so he didn't play anymore. And but Samford obviously has been able to get kids from, I know Andy Summerlin, I think it's from a few years ago, transferred in from Memphis. So they've been able to get some of those group of 5 guys.
I've got to go. I got to go because I had the station